Hello, everybody.
Greetings. Okay, let me start by saying, um, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We have Gary Hendrickson with us. Gary is an old friend of mine from like 34 years. We worked together with Bechtel Corporation in Los Angeles, and we were seconded to Walt Disney Imagineering on their Euro Disney project. So Gary and I became great friends, and we've kept in touch ever since. So we have Gary joining us from Mexico. I believe you're in Mexico right now.
Yes, I'm in Mexico right now.
Thank you for taking all the trouble to adjust to our time frame. And so Gary is kind of an expert on a very interesting subject. It's a Chinese philosophy which brings in harmony into your life if you design the spaces according to that. So this is one subject I thought we should go through because Gary is an expert on that. He's written several books, and it's called Feng Shui. It's a Chinese philosophy to bring harmony through certain elements and specifically how you design those spaces. So, Gary, I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Great. Gary lives in the USA.
Analyzing existing land and deciding where a building can be placed and how and its orientation. Of course, we take into consider all the site conditions that we look at as architects. That goes into it as well. We analyze existing buildings and help fix them, make them more prosperous, more healthy, more harmonious, more enjoyable to be in. We can plan new construction planning. That includes what phases to do different parts of construction in, because timing is a big part of feng shui. Um, and of course, every person has their own element and energy that can be inserted into a residential project in terms of, for example, planning how you orient the bedroom and the bed for a couple, for example, and kids, and so forth. So, and then of course workstations in office environments, and then of course in China and other Asian communities, using feng shui for appropriate burials is a big aspect of feng shui. Not so much used in the West, though. It's more in China and Asian cultures. So we can switch to the next slide. Okay, this is where we get into the actual chemistry of feng shui. The goal is to capture good qi. Qi is energy, and there's 5 kinds of energies that we work with in feng shui. One is energy that flows as if it's water or air, and energy that moves in cycles of time. There's a 20-year cycle that we use all the time. There's a 60-year cycle. There's a 1-year cycle, a monthly cycle, and there's a day and hourly cycle that we can use for different purposes as well. The magnetic energies and directions of the planet is a big, big part of feng shui, especially for what they call classical feng shui. And then the alchemy of 5 elements, which is the 5 elements of traditional Chinese medicine of metal, water, wood, fire, and earth, and how they interact in our environments, because everything is made out of those 5 elements. Of course, in other systems, you have 4 elements of earth, air, fire, and water. Well, in the Chinese system, they don't have air, but they do have metal and wood, which is the metal is sort of similar in terms of its actions compared to air. Um, and then we have chi, which is influenced by thought and intention. So this is more what we would call the law of attraction is a big topic, at least in the Western world, of personal growth and so forth. And it has to do with where you put your focus attracts energy and so forth. So that's part of feng shui, not so much used around the world so much as in the West. Okay. And of course, getting now next into the next slide, we are talking about the elements of metal, water, wood, fire, and earth. And you can see we have a productive cycle of the elements. So fire, when it burns, it creates more earth. The ash goes into the earth. Earth becomes compressed and forms eventually metals. Metals provide the atmosphere for water to and condensation to brew on it. And then water is the food or brings nutrients to wood like trees and plants. And then wood, again, in turn, is the fuel for fire. So that's the constructive cycle of the elements. And that is what is very important to understand. Then we have something called the reductive cycle of the elements, whereas fire reduces wood, it's kind of going backwards. And wood reduces water, and water reduces metal, metal reduces earth, and earth reduces fire. Then we have a third cycle, which is called the domination cycle, which is shown, excuse me, which is shown in the center, that star pattern. Fire melts metal, metal chops wood, wood draws the energy out of the earth, earth blocks water from flowing, and water douses out fire. So we have three cycles that are shown in this cycle of the five elements. This is really the crux of how the alchemy of feng shui elements really work. And to take it into another level, color is a frequency. It's on the spectrum of all of the different frequencies from microwaves to gamma waves and all the mental aspects of thought patterns and so forth. So on the light spectrum, there's so many different frequencies of energy. And so color is just in a narrow spectrum of frequencies, but it is a frequency. And so each element has its own frequency. And when it's placed in the right location, it actually has a magnetic effect on the atmosphere in the space. And I'm going to show you some samples of drawings that bring this into perspective further in this presentation. We can go into the next slide then. Okay, this is typical what you learn in architecture school, of course, is site selection is really important, but this brings in feng shui aspects of it. We have something that I'm going to, in the next slide, you're going to see the 4 celestial animals that we look for in an ideal site selection process. We say that we like to have good mountain and good water, but not water underneath. Have any of you become familiar with Frank Lloyd Wright and his designs in the United States? Well, indeed. I was there, and what's interesting to note is that it's constantly under repair. Because whereas he has some really interesting design ideas, but he wasn't that great with materials all the time. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And water underneath a building is considered by most dowsers as to be a very not helpful thing. So we try to avoid having water streams underground. So we look for that when we're looking for a site for a new building. We make sure that there's not water running underground like an underground stream, ideally, and certainly not one exposed to the air. But go ahead. Yeah, because water flowing underneath a building is considered ill health. It creates ill health. Right. Yeah. It's well, besides deteriorating the building materials, I mean, it's a fun architectural idea, but in terms of sustainability of the materials themselves, oh, you've got mold, you've got deterioration of the materials, and so forth. He's got stucco on this building, and the stucco is always falling apart. So, so not so good. Um, Next, a building next to water is okay, And there are certain places where water can be placed, and that's according to a school of Feng Shui that I use a lot, which is called water dragon formulas, which I'll show samples of in a minute. So we also look for a good magnetic direction. There are 20-year cycles that we use a lot. We just shifted into a new 20-year cycle in 2024. The last cycle began in 2004 and just ended at the beginning of January of 2024. And we are in a new cycle that goes from 2024 through 2044. And this affects a school of Feng Shui that I use all the time called the Flying Stars Analysis. It's just one of the classical Feng Shui schools. And this is one of the most powerful Feng Shui schools that I have discovered in all my years of working with Feng Shui. Excuse me. Because it determines the luck of the building. So there is one type that is very, very lucky. It's very prosperous. It fosters fame and fortune and is just really good for health, for harmony, for creation, creativity, and good wealth and abundance and good health. And then there are two average type of house categories, which are fine, and they can be improved with Feng Shui techniques. And there's a fourth type, which kind of like here in the United States, we call Murphy's Law building, which is a building that's got problems all the time. And it's always challenging whoever's living there. No matter, families move in, have problems, and then move out in a residential situation. Or it could be like I mentioned earlier, where you have a building that has multiple buildings in it. I mean, businesses, but they're going out of business all the time because the building is an unlucky building. And what makes it lucky or unlucky is not just somebody's decision. It has to do with the year the building is built, combined with the compass degrees that the building is facing in specific degrees. So that's a big part of classical Feng Shui, which I work with all the time. And you can identify these buildings. And the good news is that you can improve every building. So in this current time period that we're in right now, there are no lucky buildings being built, but there are also no unlucky buildings being built right now. They're all being average or middle quality buildings, which are fine. And I call this period, which is designated by the number 9, as a reset period, because it's kind of calming the energy down. Everybody who knows about Feng Shui would want to create a lucky building if possible, but also people that don't know about this inadvertently can create unlucky buildings where there's problems all the time happening. So in construction, contractors are always talking about that, where they just come across projects where they just can't wait till it ends because there's just one problem after another with it. I'm sure you've probably seen those kinds of projects in the past. But the good news is that is fixable. Even in this current time period, you can take a building and change it. And some of the things we can do, we can talk about later about how you can change the energy of a building. This slide that's up right now is called the armchair position for citing the best development. If you have the choice of searching for land for a project, this is what we call the 4 celestial animals of a site. In the back or the rear of the site, it's best to have the highest point behind you, like the back of a chair supports you when you're sitting in a chair. That's called the tortoise. And then to your right side, we have the tiger, and then on the left side, looking out from the rear, you have on the left side the dragon. And they say the green dragon and the white tiger and the black turtle. And then in front of you, in long distance views, you have what's called the fire phoenix. And that represents your long distance views, your long distance goals and dreams and visions. Whereas the white tiger in the right side represents wealth and abundance. the east in the rear, I mean the east side, or the left side as you're looking out, is representing helpful alliances, I should say. Um, and then the rear is your backbone support. That's an ideal site. And then right in front of you, in the area that you can see water flowing through in front, it's really ideal if you had water flowing from the left to the right. That's an ideal site. If you had all of these elements in it, that would be a most powerful alignment to have a building sited right there where they call it the dragon's nest. Um, and you can see a lot of buildings that are built this way. They seem to be having a lot of longevity. So that's what we try for if you have a choice in selecting a site. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, well, when selecting a site, you want to walk the land and tune into the energy. Hone in on the best site for all the conditions that we want to look for in terms of architecture and in terms of Feng Shui. And now I'm going to say something that some of you might think I'm a little kooky, but I don't care because I think that I've actually experienced myself, which is there's higher dimensions that we cannot see in our third dimensional world. We could call it the fifth dimension and beyond. And there are entities or beings that live in those dimensions. You could call them like guardian angels. And there's what we call in Feng Shui, and in there's a system that I use a lot when I'm working on the land. It's called Paralandra. Have any of you heard of the property in northern Scotland called Findhorn? No? There's a book called The Findhorn Garden. And a little story here. Findhorn was created in northern Scotland, right on the rocky coast of the ocean that it was based on in the northern Scotland. And it was back in the 60s when a bunch of very poor people only could afford a very rocky site to plop down on, and they just had single wide mobile homes, and that's all that they could muster in terms of finances. And so they started a community there, and they started to grow gardens, and they proceeded to grow fruits and vegetables so huge that the world has never seen before. And scientists came from all around the world to figure out what the heck is going on. How could these people be growing gigantic fruits and vegetables on this rocky peninsula of land that they have acquired? Because it just seemed impossible. And it turned out after they got there that they listened to all the inhabitants, all the residents of this community. And what was going on was that they were actually listening to what we call the nature spirits of the land. That they were asking guidance from the nature spirits, and nature spirits were giving them guidance as to what to put where, what ingredients to add to the soils, what crystals to add underground, what rocks and nutrients to put in different places around the property. And by listening to the guidance of these nature spirits, they proceeded to grow these amazing gardens, and it's world famous now, and it became a world site where there's classes on all kinds of topics about connecting with the earth and sustainability and regenerative design and so forth. It's quite a story, and the book that's called The Magic of Findhorn is one of the books that's fascinating to read, as well as The Findhorn Garden. So there's a few books written about it. So when I talk about checking in with the nature spirits of the land, we call it the overlighting deva of the land. And every property has this. When the land gets divided up into its particular property boundaries, somehow, I don't know how, but somehow there is like an entity or like a guardian angel that gets assigned to the property. And I have learned how to work with them by using the Paralandra system, where you you work with flower essences. It's quite a fascinating system. You connect. It's the flower essences are kind of like a medium that connects you to the land. And I tried working in these processes without using the flower essences, and I found that I was completely out of touch, and it kind of wigged me out. I was not able to connect at all without using the processes that they had developed. So it's something to explore further, is this connecting with the nature spirits of the land. Sometimes you can ask a question like, is it okay to build, to place a house or a building in this location right here? And you have to be willing to hear a no. And then you can ask the question, well, is there something we could do differently to the land in order to make it be okay? And usually you can get a yes by saying, okay, well, you need to clear the land. And sometimes, boy, this goes down a big rabbit hole. But there's a lot of experiences I've had where clearing the land, zip through all this. Let's go really quickly on the next slide. Okay, we can skip this one and move on. Okay. Like I said, I start with the bedroom because you want to get the particular directions of the couple, if it's a house, if it's a residence. And I start with the bed location, and then I arrange the bedroom around the ideal bed location for them. And I always, when I'm designing a house, I always design more than one bed location that's helpful for the room as well as for the room in the house. We look at their magnetic directions of the house, and then I go out and I stake it out and so forth. And I overlay a grid drawing to show what energies are going to be in the different areas of the house. Let's move quickly to the next slide, please. Okay, this is an example of a personal direction chart for each individual. And there are 8 directions, so there are 8 different types of people, and everybody belongs to one of these 8 directions as a category. And therefore, everybody has different sleeping directions, everybody has different focus directions for research, and for also doing laser-like focused work and so forth. This is what I use all the time when I'm working with whole corporations as well as residential projects to help people get into their good orientations. If you're falling asleep during a presentation, it could be that you're facing a bad direction for you. So I often say when I'm doing live presentations, I don't claim to be a boring speaker. It's just that you're probably facing a bad direction. So we can switch to the next slide, please. Okay, this is an example of a grid that I use to lay out a new building on a property. There are 8 directions, and so I figure out where would be the best and most important first thing to look for is in a building is where is one of the best sectors to have an entry. And why don't we switch to the next slide, because it might be easier to talk about it this way. This is an example of an existing flying stars analysis in an example of a typical bungalow type building. And you can see you start at the center and radiate out in all 8 directions of 45 degrees. And you can see that I have the labels around the 8 directions labeled, and I have numbers and letters around underneath those abbreviations of the directions. Those numbers and letters tell me about the kind of energy that's in each one of those magnetic sectors. It tells me whether the energy is helpful or not helpful. And every building has helpful energies and challenging energies. And so our goal is to balance out the good energies, make them better, and to balance the energies that are challenging and definitely neutralize the challenge of those energies. And those energies can cause accidents, they can cause arguments, they can cause legal problems. All kinds of challenges can happen in life. In fact, every kind of challenge you can imagine can be determined with Feng Shui and can be avoided or mitigated by using these techniques. And so what I've done here is I've listed the elements, the numbers also tell me which of the 5 elements are represented in the atmosphere of that particular magnetic sector. This is very deep level stuff, and not many people go to this level of it, but I have found that the elements in the right magnetic sectors, as we're seeing on this chart, really creates a harmony that is visceral, that you actually physically can feel it. And I have proven time and time and time again how effective this really is. And not a lot of Feng Shui people go into this depth of analysis. But the colors that you decorate with, or that you finish the building in, like picking countertops, picking floor materials, picking cabinet materials, picking carpeting, whatever, is all, when you use this analysis, you're building in harmony into the building, which is quite amazing. We probably should switch to the next one really quickly because I'm giving you a quick overview of all of this. This is called water dragon formulas. And this is where we calculate where the best water features would be placed in order to enhance the opportunities coming to you from the outer world. Whereas the flying stars analysis that I just showed you analyzes the energy and refines it to create a real harmonious interior environment. The water dragons, when you have water fountains, water features in the right places inside and outside of a building, it attracts opportunities from the outer world. I got a quick question for you. Do we have the ability to extend this session? Because I guess we're going less than an hour here. Okay, because I got a notice it's saying we only had 10 minutes left. So, um, pardon me? Oh, okay. Oh, and then we can continue on. Okay, cool. Thank you so much. So I love this one because I've had experiences with the water dragon formulas such that when you place a water fountain or a water feature in the right location and then turn it on, which is what we call activating it, we've had so many people get new calls for new business coming in within a couple hours of plugging in a new water feature. So this is one that I really love to do because it has such visceral experiences really quickly. Okay, we could go to the next slide. Here's an example of a water fountain that is all flowing in a particular direction. In a general sense, we always want water flowing towards the building, not under the building, but towards the building. And because it's bringing chi or prana into or towards the building environment. And again, Feng Shui is about capturing the good chi and letting it stay around for a while. Okay, we could go to the next slide. Okay, so this is going into commercial property developments. I'm going to cut to the chase with these. In other words, go quickly through this because there's so much more. Okay, so creating bubble diagrams. I'm sure you're all familiar with that as architecture students. And then what I add is determining the best compass directions or orientations of all the buildings relative to not only the circulation patterns and functional relationships of each building, but triangulating between each of the buildings in terms of where water features can be placed outside in courtyards and things like that, where they all are working beneficially for all of the buildings, where all the water features outside, say in a courtyard, are acting beneficially for all of the buildings. And it's kind of like playing three-dimensional chess because you got a lot of calculations to figure out all the buildings and how these water dragons can work. But these are a lot of the things that help determine not only where water features can be placed in an overall campus layout, but also you also have to take in consideration what sectors, magnetic sectors, the most powerful entries would be. Because ideally you want to have the most important entries be in really productive, healthy sectors of the flying stars analysis. So you're really building in lots of good energy from the start when you're designing with Feng Shui. Okay, We can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, can we switch to the next one? Okay, this is a development that I designed in the United States. It was about 147 acres. I don't know what you call it in Pakistan in terms of land amounts, but this was I don't know if you have hectares or what you call it there. Okay, square feet? Really? Oh, okay. Are you on the metric system there? Okay. Well, at any rate, this project, I was handed just the perimeter of this project, and I was tasked to lay out 47 lots, and we had to avoid wetlands on the property, as well as there's a lake at the very bottom B size. So that was all designed with Feng Shui multiple Feng Shui principles, because I designed it so that almost all the buildings could be lucky buildings at the time. This is another project that I worked on as a retreat center, again, and integrating different schools of Feng Shui into the retreat pods that were going off on the upper left there. We had a hot tub complex with pools and hot tubs, and we had a healing building as well, which is the largest building on the right upper corner. And so we used Feng Shui to orient all these buildings and so forth. One building was an existing building that was the building down on the southmost part of this property. That was an existing building. Everything else was added on this property. This was a project that I consulted on where all the black rectangles are different high rises. And I was in charge of orienting these so that they would all be in really good orientations, so that it would be very beneficial for everybody that lived there, as well as for all the contractors working on it, because it would be prosperous buildings. So this is something that you can definitely do with Feng Shui. We can switch to the next slide, please. Okay, this is a project in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The existing building was an existing restaurant, which is do you have a like a pointer or anything that you have access to? So you see on the lower right-hand side, there's a building that has two sections to it, close to the street, and there's parking out in front of it. The side on the left is the existing restaurant. The part that we are adding to the right side is a brand new additional retail space. And then the building on the upper left-hand corner is an additional retail space. And both of those were oriented such that if he got his financing really quickly, and he was ready to go into construction. But on this particular case, we were beginning the project in 2004, and 2003 he was ready to go. And I told him that if he was to build in that time, these new buildings would be actually unlucky buildings and would not be very prosperous at all. And he did not like the owner did not like to hear that, of course. But I told him, if you just wait until you can break ground, but if you don't get it enclosed before February of 2004, then they'll become lucky buildings. So that's what he did begrudgingly. He waited, and now the project went into construction after the beginning of 2004, and it's all very prosperous, and he's doing very well. So timing, again, this is an example of how timing really impacts Feng Shui and the built environment. So we could switch to the next slide. Okay, so this is how you insert Feng Shui in deeper levels for both residential and commercial projects. Like I mentioned earlier, each individual workstation orientation is really helpful. I usually orient everybody so they have a really good research direction, which is a quieter energy. Everybody has like a laser, like power direction and lucky direction to face. And by the way, everybody has a direction that's really good and lucky to face when they're making important phone calls. And you can feel that. It's quite interesting. And then, so that's possible to create for every single workstation. You can pick all the colors of all the interiors. And as I mentioned before, color is a frequency, and it's visceral. You can feel it literally. Um, and then the water fountains can be inserted and designed into a project, both inside and outside, and into the landscaping and gardens outside. Okay, we can switch to the next slide, please. Okay, we're going to go through this really quickly because there's a lot of these these are typical Feng Shui principles in landscape design and garden design. And I do a whole class called Feng Shui for your